586-7297. Straight out to the Lion's Den. Andrea still faces 13 charges, including perjury. But why on earth are prosecutors taking murder off the table right now? And I'm going to start with Jay Apt, who is very deep inside this case. In fact, you represent Andrea Snyderman's former BFF, best friend.
Yeah. Jane, I've got from good sources inside the DA's office that they are, in fact, going to drop all of the most serious charges. And to me, that's pretty shocking. If I were Don and Marilyn and Steve Snyderman, I would be livid. I would be so angry and betrayed and upset. And I got to tell you, as a defense lawyer, where there is a presumption of innocence, and you do have to be found guilty beyond a reasonable doubt, and we do have all these protections for the accused in our Constitution, I'd be pretty outraged if I were Andrea Snyderman, that they kept me on house arrest for 11 months before they dropped the charges. But the real egg here is on Robert James's face. And Robert's a friend. He's a friend of mine, a personal friend.
You're talking about the prosecutors. Not everybody knows every last detail of this case.
No.
By the way,
the buck stops with the DA.
Okay, here's Andrea Snyderman wearing a big heart on her chest as she is led away in handcuffs. So, yeah, either way, they're wrong. You're saying either way, they've goofed up. If she is guilty, they're letting a murderess go free. If she's not guilty, then they humiliated and persecuted a woman for months on end who had nothing to do with it.
Look, Robert is a professional and excellent trial lawyer.
Let me jump in for a second. Let me go to Heather Hansen, criminal defense attorney. I hear you're shaking your head and sighing a lot.
Well, Jane, the thing is, there's still 13 counts against her. So she is still being charged for all these counts of perjury. She's being charged for the counts of concealment. She still could face up to 130 years in prison. So it's not as if she's just being let go on her merry old way.
I've tried cases against this. I've tried cases with this judge.
But listen. The problem is, if you can't prove your case, you're not going to
Why are they just figuring that out now, though? That's my question. And Tanya Acker, maybe you know why.
Well, I think that there could be a couple of things going on here. But first, I have to say it's a complete mistake to assume that simply because they dropped these charges now, that they are precluded from bringing them again later. I mean, if anything, I think it's better, frankly, for Rusty's family that the prosecution not try to move forward on an overcharged case if they don't have the evidence. If they drop it now, before jeopardy attaches, before the trial begins, and they're able to pull a murder charge together later, there's nothing to stop them from doing that. And actually, beyond that, Jane, the fact that this is happening at the 11th hour may not be all that surprising. I mean, it could be a tactic by Robert's office. Well, no, because look, this could have been some leverage.
Let me just jump in and let me say this, Jane. What I think is exactly what Tanya is saying is that there could have been leverage involved here, and a lot of times prosecutors will do that. When I was a DA or when I was a prosecutor, sometimes you use that leverage to see if they will fold. It's almost like playing chicken to see, okay, well, we're going to go forward on these charges if you don't take a plea. And at the end of the day, what this shows to me, Jane, is that there's just not enough evidence. There's no admissions. There's no physical evidence. I mean, we're talking about a mother of two with no criminal history. And so, of course, the prosecutor has an ethical duty not to go forward on charges if they believe that they cannot prove it beyond a reasonable doubt, which we all know is the highest burden.
You say there's no evidence. Okay, so let me read you, because we have some court documents that we just obtained, and we've been analyzing them. Now, Hemi Newman told a close female friend of his that he thought Andrea and he were soulmates. That's what he used, the word. Prosecutors want to bring in this friend's statement as evidence, and she told the attorneys, quote, Hemi and Andrea decided they were soulmates, but Andrea was adamant that she would not leave her husband and kids. Still, during a trip together, Hemi said she came into his room, they kissed and fondled each other and had everything but intercourse. Everything but intercourse. That doesn't sound like a one-way obsession to me. So straight out to the Lion's Den. Here's the rub, although maybe I shouldn't use that phrase in connection with this case. If Andrea did indeed say she would not leave her husband and kids, doesn't that bolster her claim that, well, maybe she did have a little hanky-panky with this guy. She didn't have anything to do with his murder. Go ahead.
The real evidence, I mean, look, I think she's obviously having an affair with him, but that's sort of, additional circumstantial evidence. Yes, there's no direct evidence in the case, but the real strong evidence to convict her, which Robert James could do, is the timeline of the phone calls. And I've said this many times to you, Jane. I've said it in a lot of other places. If you look at the timeline of the phone calls in the case, there's no way Andrea Snyderman could have known that her husband had been shot unless she was in on it. And then she told 2 people within minutes after the murder took place that she knew her husband had been shot.
Heather.
The only way she could have known about that is if Hemi included her in the plan.
But she could have had fears about it. Given, I do too.
Fears?
I think she could have had fears
No one
about
told her
this.
there'd be a shooting.
Given the fact that he was, but he was obsessed. He was crazy. She was afraid of him.
And yet,
she certainly could have come to the conclusion. Just give me a minute. Jump to the conclusion that he was shot by Newman.
That was a big conclusion, though.
I
think
that would also be based upon speculation
true.
too. I mean,
As a matter of fact.
Speculation.
As a matter of fact.
And this is the thing.
No, go ahead and finish, because I have a statement here that I'm looking for, and it's actually really the fact that he called police a week before. Actually, exactly a week before the husband calls police and says there's a creep in my yard, and that creep turned out to be Hemi Newman.
And yet Andrea
Exactly.
deflects Hemi away from the police for 6 weeks after the murder.
All right, listen.
So the timing might be the timing might be suspect. It might be suspicious, but we're talking about speculation here, and this is all circumstantial. And we all know circumstantial cases are very difficult for the DA to prove or the state to prove.
But it also does. There's something about her in terms of the murder charges and being perhaps a party to this plan to kill her husband, that to the prosecutors doesn't smell right. I think that you really did. One of the other guests made the really great point about that very damning piece of evidence about how she somehow knew about Rusty's death before she was told.
Well,
that may not be enough. That's not enough to connect her to the murder, but it's enough to suspect that there's something else out there.
Additionally,
It's enough to go to trial, which Robert James isn't doing. And he's a great lawyer and a great prosecutor, but he's being a coward.
I want to jump in here. The prosecution says Andrea told Hemi Rusty's schedule so that he would know when and where to go to kill him. Now, Rusty, as I mentioned, caught Hemi dressed in disguise and loitering around their house, and he called cops on his ultimate killer just a week before this guy kills him. Listen to this.
There's a man who was sleeping in my backyard. He's running. I think he has a gun in his back pocket, and now he's running away. I don't know who the hell he is, and I don't want him by my house.
Okay, this is the house. Is that what kind of
house?
What he looked like? Was he black, white, Hispanic?
He looked Hispanic with a mustache. He was wearing a hat and earmuffs, black mustache. It scared the hell out of me. And I walk around the side of the house. There's some guy laying there sleeping on the side.
That poor man who you heard talking is dead. He's the one who was murdered by Hemi Newman. And Hemi Newman was the guy who was in disguise loitering around his house. So, John Lewis, reporter WSB, you've broken this whole issue of them dropping the charges, your station. Could it be that she could just say, hey, listen, my husband called 911 a week before I was scared, so therefore I assumed he had been shot because he had been targeted, that she had all these different men. But you look at that kiss, and we could see it one more time, and I want to go to Anna Young, criminal defense attorney. We learn a lot about, look at this kiss. It's very seductive. What does that say about Andrea Snyderman?
You know what, Jane? You raise a very good point. Just at first glance, it looks very odd because when you look at it, you say, okay, what is she saying to her? It doesn't look like their typical friend kiss. I mean, she's embracing her face, she's pulling her in. And Andrea Snyderman might be doing it as an expression of saying, this is my friend, I have my loyalties to her, she knows the truth, she's on my side. Or on the flip side, you could argue and say that it's more along the lines of manipulation and more along the lines of a theory that she is a certain black widow and that she's here to manipulate and not necessarily such an innocent person. But of course, if I'm the defense attorney here, I'm saying to the district attorney's office or the state attorney's office, bring it, bring the evidence. Everything that you're saying here might be circumstantial, but at the end of the day, a crucial point, Jane, and something that I'd like to make a valid point.
But I mean, to me,
it was unfathomable and unbelievable that it could be him. Someone that proposed to care about me, care about Rusty, care about my family. be a normal guy, be my boss. And he murdered my husband.
Oh, yeah, she seems so outraged there, but as she sat in jail accused of orchestrating her husband's murder, get this. She was already thinking about who would play her in the movie of the week, and she actually said during a recorded jail conversation, quote, if Sandra Bullock wasn't so old, she'd be a good choice. So for all her crying and screaming, Tanya Acker, it seems like she is very narcissistic and obsessed with who would play her in a movie.
You think, Jane? I mean, really? I'm sorry. I was just laughing a little bit there. There's a little bit of me that feels like in this conversation with her, and your Sandra Bullock point makes me think this even more strongly, that we might be overthinking her a little bit. She's a narcissist, all right? She's a narcissist. She's unfaithful. Maybe she had 3 other boyfriends out there. All of this is certainly helping to paint a certain portrait of her, especially if she thinks that Sandra Bullock is not worthy to play her in the movie.